Get started. So what I'd like to do first is thank everybody for joining us this afternoon on a beautiful sunny day here in Cincinnati. We're going to be going over all the great benefits of Sage Fixed Assets and how to manage all your fixed assets. And we have Wayne Austin from Sage that will be doing most of the presentation today. So I'd like to go over a few quick housekeeping items, and then I'll have Wayne get started. So everybody will be on mute during the webinar. If you have questions, you can use the chat, and we'll be monitoring that and probably doing most of the question and answer at the end. And then finally, this is going to be recorded or is being recorded, so you'll be able to follow up on our website afterwards, or follow up with any questions with the person that you work with at Martin & Associates. So without further ado, I'll let Wayne take it over.
Thanks, Rick.
All right.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Wayne Austin. I'm a sales engineer at Sage Software on the Sage Fixed Asset Solution. So today, what we're going to be covering is why you need to manage your fixed asset, why you need an actual solution to ensure you're managing your fixed assets correctly through their life cycle. We'll talk a bit about data integrity, business continuity, or disaster recovery. We'll also highlight some of the hidden costs that can be tied to ghost or zombie assets, as well as identifying fraud. We'll also talk about the integration with Sage 100, and also I'll touch on Sage 500, which some of you may be on as well. And I will make some time to go through and give a high-level demonstration of the solution so you can see how all of the various components might meet your business needs. So first, why invest in a fixed asset solutions? Now, one of the things you'll want to do, since this is really one of the highest cost items on your bottom line is your fixed assets, you'll want to have the ability to efficiently manage those fixed assets through their complete life cycle. And when I say their complete life cycle, I'm speaking in reference to from before they become a fixed asset, while you're going through construction in progress or work in progress, accumulating all of the costs tied to that, and then being able to place those items in service and depreciate them through their full life cycle through disposals. Now, some of the important things that you will need to ensure that you can manage these assets correctly is that you have a solution that provides data integrity, gives you complete accuracy in your fixed asset to identify potential fraud or missing items. This is where ghost and zombie assets will come into play, and I'll go over both of those items since they're potential high-cost items as part of this presentation. We'll also talk about disaster recovery and how having a solution like Sage Fixed Assets can help you prepare for that. So first, let's talk about data integrity. So one of the things you'll want any solution that you're using to manage your fixed assets to ensure accuracy of the data that's going to be in your database. So data integrity is an integral part of this. So let's do a comparison looking at someone potentially using spreadsheets, for example, to manage their fixed assets currently, and what are some of the pitfalls of that versus using Sage Fixed Asset Solution. So for example, in a spreadsheet, data integrity is pretty limited. It can be error prone. You don't have the ability to manage access control. Sure, you can password protect a spreadsheet, but you really cannot limit what individual users can do. It's an all or nothing type scenario. With our Sage Fixed Asset Solution, of course, provides excellent data integrity as well as the ability to manage how users can access solution by creating different profiles. Error detection is pretty much non-existent in a spreadsheet, whereas our Fixed Asset Solution has built-in error detections, built-in audit trails, and of course, ease of handling tax because of all of the built-in tax rules. And those are all benefits that you cannot get out of a spreadsheet. For example, doing formulas to do tax calculation in a spreadsheet. You hope that they're correct, and if the person that may have created those formulas, for example, is no longer in that role or no longer with the company, then everyone else has to try and reverse engineer what has been done and hope that they're correct. Whereas using Sage Fixed Assets, we update our tax rules each year, so you're guaranteed you're going to have accurate built-in formulas, built-in calculations to ensure that your depreciation is being calculated correctly. Let's talk a little about business continuity or disaster recovery. Now, as all of you have seen lately, the storms are getting worse each year, and the chance of you having some type of an issue at one of your sites, unfortunately, is increasing over time. You want to ensure that a solution is going to help you actually get through that process. Now, one of the things you'll be able to do with Sage Fixed Asset is be able to easily identify what assets are where in your organization. You can also attach images, invoices, receipts, and so on, so that you'll have accurate and up-to-date records. So if you do have to file an insurance claim, as we know, proof is the best thing. You can easily provide what you had, what the value was, if you've done any upgrades to that piece of equipment, and be able to identify that to your insurance provider and make that process much, much smoother. Now, let's talk a little bit about ghost and zombie assets. For those of you not familiar with those terms, here are a couple of quick definitions. Ghost assets, of course, are assets that are either lost or stolen, and you still are carrying them on the books, but they're nowhere to be found, not in service. And zombie assets are quite the opposite, where something may have been placed in service, but there's no representation of that on the books, and therefore you don't have it covered in insurance, and you certainly are not paying any insurance premium for that, or property taxes, for example. So let's look a little deeper at why ghost assets matter. Now, there's going to be certainly impact potentials for taxes, property taxes, your depreciation expense calculation, and all of the things that you would normally be doing for assets you have on the book, whereas this asset is not in service, can't be found, it's either been lost or stolen. So this, for example, can impact budgets if you're planning your next fiscal with what assets you need to replace, and you are going to be budgeting based on things you have in service when you might be missing some critical tools required for your business process. Zombie assets, of course, can also have some financial impact. If, for example, you're inventorying software, you may not have the right amount of licenses, you certainly don't have any insurance coverage on them because you don't have them on the books, but someone has placed them on in service in your organization. For example, in the case of IT assets, this could pose a potential security risk because your IT staff may not be protecting that particular asset correctly. Very, very high potential for theft with zombie assets because you don't have them on the books, you're not doing inventory on them, and you're not even aware that it is there. By the time you do realize that, an asset like that may be missing, and certainly now you've got an issue tied to that. Let's look at some of the financial impact of ghost assets, for example. Some potential issues not reflected on my ROI calculator on the right is certainly the impact on efficiency and the time of your staff. Okay, you certainly could have some issues with property tax overpayments, insurance premium overpayment, and this ROI calculator that you can easily access at the Sage Fixed Assets website. You can actually plug in your own numbers and roll through your own scenario live. So for this example, I'm just going to use a total cost of my fixed assets of $1 million. So a pretty modest amount. And my percentage of ghost assets, just using some industry averages here, of 15%, and a remaining value percentage of those assets of 40%. So that translates to a total cost of my ghost assets at being $150,000. The remaining value of those ghost assets would be at $60,000. Now, with the new federal tax rule limit at 21%, I'm just using that for this example. So these are all looking at potential overpayments. So in the case of federal, you're looking at 12,600 potential there. For state, and that may vary by state where you are, I'm just using 6%, which we use here in Georgia, and that translates to 3,600. For personal property tax, using a 3.4% example here, that translates to $2,040 and potential insurance premium overpayment of $1,500 based on a 0.01%. So you're welcome to go out on the Sage Fixed Assets website and run your own particular scenario to see what the potential financial impact to your organization is of those assets. So in my scenario, my first year potential savings is looking at $19,740. Now, let's talk a little bit about integration with the ERP side. Now, if you're currently using Sage 100 or 100 Cloud, this will integrate directly with that product. And what that means to you, for example, journal entry, you'd simply need to run depreciation, and that journal entry will be pulled by Sage 100 from the Sage Fixed Asset Depreciation module for you to be able to do your month end, for example. Asset creation. If you're using the accounts payable and or the purchase order module, you can actually create assets from inside of Sage 100 while actually doing those processes. So that's really great direct integration that would make your workflow much easier, eliminating redundant entry as far as creating assets. Now, from the accounts payable side, it is a one-to-one relationship. So you're doing one accounts payable transaction, you can create a single asset. On the purchase order side, it's a one-to-many relationship, and you can work on a single PO and actually create multiple assets from that purchase order. If you're one of the users that are using Sage 500, you also have this ability as far as the journal entry side, but for asset creation and integration with the accounts payable side, you would need to be using the premier version of Sage Fixed Asset, which runs on the SQL Server platform, and that version will actually do a two-way integration. So it makes that entire process and workflow much faster and much smoother, and certainly eliminates errors, and there's some cost saving as far as time and efficiency goes. This is an example of what that integration looks like if you're looking in Sage 100 and you've set up the visual workflow so you can actually launch into your accounts payable invoice, post it and create an asset from that, or you can certainly do that from the purchase order side as well and post it and create fixed asset in the depreciation module. You can actually even launch the Sage Fixed Asset module from inside of Sage 100. So definitely get with Rick if you are interested in moving forward with the Sage Fixed Asset solution, and I'm quite sure that the team at Morton & Associates can help you with configuring that integration for you. So let's talk about the Sage Fixed Asset solution in total. So as I stated earlier, it is a solution that you can use to manage your fixed assets through their complete life cycle. So the planning module, for example, is totally geared towards those work in progress or construction in progress before they become a fixed asset, where you will be able to manage all of your budgets and be able to measure against that before placing them in service. The planning module will send assets to the depreciation module where they can be placed in service, all of your depreciation calculations handled, and of course, ensuring that you're meeting IRS or GAAP rules for proper depreciation calculation. The tracking module is used for actually doing physical inventory of the fixed assets, and I will go a little deeper into each of these to give you a better understanding. On the reporting end of this, there are many standard reports built in all the modules, but there's an optional custom reporting feature that allows you to do any type of ad hoc reports you want from scratch, and that is actually using SAP Crystal Reports. So let's take a deeper look at the planning module. So how this module would work, you would be able to define and manage any type of upcoming projects you have. You can set and control budgets for those projects. So for example, you can start off with an original budget of some amount, and as you're going through that project, let's say you have cost increases or revised estimates, you can maintain that original budget while creating a revised budget and actually measure your spend against both sets of numbers and do reporting against both sets of numbers. So if you look at the graphic on the right, that is actually a project snapshot of one of my sample projects where you can see what's spent or unspent of the budget. You can see what's capitalized, what's expense, and even pending transactions. And if you look towards the lower middle, where you can see project statistics, that is actually displaying my actual spend against both an original as well as a revised budget. Once any line item spending is complete, you're then actually able to send that to the depreciation module to start depreciating, and it can be sent over with all the information needed to actually start that depreciation process, even including depreciation method and estimated life with the use of templates. Now, the depreciation module is actually the heart of the solution. This is where you can actually take advantage of all of the baked-in tax rules. We've got currently 52 built-in depreciation methods that are available in all of the books. So this gives you great confidence in being able to accurately depreciate your fixed assets for federal tax rules, for example, for the US or Canada. Now, typically we'll do 2 updates per year. Our tax update typically comes out in January. So by staying updated, you'll ensure you'll have all of the latest tax rule changes. Now, there's some other great tools as well built in to help you navigate this process. And one of those tools is the Audit Advisor. What this tool does, you can run this periodically throughout the year, and you can run this for any of the books. So if you run this, for example, against a tax book, it is going to identify any potential red flags based on something you may be doing incorrectly. That's a potential red flag for getting you audited. So if you look at the middle of this report, you'll see that red X, and it says an exception found. And in this particular case, it is identifying the issue, and below that you'll see a resolution. And in this particular scenario, I've got an asset with less than 100% business use, and I'm trying to take a full year depreciation on that, which of course is against IRS rules. You can run this for your internal book, and it'll do the same for GAAP. Ensure that what you are doing, you're not doing anything that's a potential red flag that can end up getting you audited. So it's a really great tool. Now, there are many standard reports built into the solution. You have the ability to customize some of these reports as well. And you can also create different profiles to limit what users can even access what reports. You can assign users to profiles if you, for example, you want to restrict them from doing certain company functions. You want to limit them from doing things that impact depreciation, such as running depreciation, doing adjustment, and various other granular details that you can actually do. So some really great tools for access controls and managing who can do what within the solution. Some of these standard reports built in, especially if you are doing your own tax depreciation, and even if you are using a third-party accounting firm, for example, the fact that you can generate your own 4562, for example, an actual fileable form, makes a really great use and gives you full transparency into what's going on. And you can simply export that report and send it off to your provider or use it for your tax filing. You'll also be able to generate the tax expense report, which is actually used for reconciling that 4562. Some other standard reports for tax would be your sale of property or your 4797. There are property tax reports as well. The tracking module. So this module is actually used for doing your full physical inventories of your fixed assets. And by that, I mean you'd be able to, for example, assign asset IDs to your assets, generate barcodes, which you can populate on your fixed assets. and be able to actually do a full physical inventory where you can use either a traditional scanner or an Android app. We currently have the Android app available, as well as various types of scanners. You can also feel some confidence in the fact that the tracking module software itself does require a license, but any of these scanners, anyone using the Android app, for example, does not require a license. So you could have 3 people using the tracking software and 50 users out there that are actually doing the physical inventory. You just need the 3 licenses. Currently, we do not have the Apple iOS available. That is still in development and will be forthcoming at a later date. And by the way, the tracking module actually uses the same database as the depreciation modules. So any groups you created, for example, if you have multiple locations and you created groups in the depreciation module to isolate assets at particular locations, all of those groups will translate over into the tracking module, and you can actually generate inventory lists based on those groups, for example, and have different people doing inventories at different sites. The general information fields in the tracking module are shared with the general information fields in the depreciation module. So, for example, as part of the inventory, you're updating location fields or any other information about a particular asset. That information gets updated in both the tracking and the depreciation modules at once. So it really works well together. One other protection built into the tracking module is that it only has access to general information fields. So if you're concerned about someone that might be an inventory manager or a site manager doing physical inventories, if they're only allowed into the tracking module, they have no means of doing anything to impact depreciation because that module has no access to the book field. So you have some great protections built in from that standpoint. Now let's talk a bit about reporting. As I stated earlier, there's 28 standard reports built in. You can customize those reports as far as changing the sort orders of those reports. But the additional custom reporting options gives you the ability to add or remove different columns of data from the standard reports, but it also gives you the ability to build any type of ad hoc reports from scratch. And I'll actually show you some examples of that. So if you have a need for advanced reporting, you can actually take advantage of that and literally build any type of report you need. So it's a very, very flexible and robust reporting solution. Now I'm going to take a few moments and go into the solution and walk through some of the key functionality so that you can get a better idea of how the solution would work in your particular environment. Okay, so I'm going to actually start off in the depreciation module, which is the heart of the solution. And the snapshot you're looking at is a feature you can have that turned on so that when you open any company, and of course you can have multiple companies in the solution, you can get a quick overview of what's going on with the assets in that company. This is one of the first places that you can see what's placed in service by quarter. So if, for example, you're doing Maker's depreciation for tax, this might be important to you. One of the first places you'll see that, hey, maybe I need to run the mid-quarter applicability test and actually may need to do a mid-quarter convention switch, which I'll actually demonstrate to you a bit later on. I can also see a quick depreciation comparison where I can see acquired value versus accumulated depreciation, look at my 5-year spend, or even a breakdown of the investment by remaining life. I can also see on the right side here, total net value of all of the assets in the company, and it even breaks it down by what's active, disposed, inactive, and so on. And I can see this information by any of the books. Okay. Now, let me go into one of my asset details. So as I mentioned a little bit earlier on, there are general information fields that are shared between depreciation and tracking. You can customize these fields. You can certainly rename them anything you choose. You can capture things like asset class, your appropriate GL account info, And of course, for integration with Sage 100, you'll want to ensure that you're using the correct accounts that are tied to the company in Sage 100. That's also a critical part of that. But I can actually go in and customize any of these fields. I can rename any of these fields I choose. So for example, my custom field 7, I have renamed that particular field to building number, and that's what's actually displayed here. These standard general information fields will take up to 25 characters. Your GL account fields will take up to 100 characters. And if you notice, when I clicked in that field earlier, I created a drop-down list. You can actually create a list chart of all of your accounts. You can create that manually, or you can actually import your data, all of your assets, into the solution first and go into that field customization, hit fill, and it's going to look at each unique entry in that field and populate that list for you. The asset ID field. This is the field that's actually used by the tracking module when you're doing physical inventories, and I'll touch on that a little bit later on. Now, if you take a look at the Transactions tab, the Transactions tab is actually where you're going to capture transactions such as transfers or disposals, be it full or partial. There's a notes area. You can enter notes about anything you wish, and you can even attach images, invoices, receipts, and so on. And it will take a really great variety of file types. So basically, if you can scan it, take a picture of it, you can attach it. It'll take PDFs, JPEGs, bitmaps, and so on. And in my case, I've got an invoice attached, and I have an image of the asset attached, and you can actually link multiple images or invoices to a single asset, or vice versa. I can take a single image or invoice and link that to multiple assets. If you order 20 pieces of equipment as a single line item, you can actually link that quite easily to multiple at once. And let's talk a little bit about the book fields down below. So these are your critical depreciation fields here. So when adding any assets, you've got to provide these critical fields, and it's simply looking for standard IRS property type, a place and service date, acquisition value, depreciation method, and estimated life. And it does, of course, support bonus depreciation if you're using the accelerated 168, identify your bonus percentage, and of course, you can also take 179 deduction. Those are all supported. Now, there's some resources built in to actually help you work through the system. So if you go to Help, What's New, and go to Learn More, we will always include what is the latest tax release included in the current release of the software. So in our release that came out this past January, we've included all of the changes to the Bipartisan Budget Act, and we've also added 2 new depreciations that you may need if you, for example, need to take advantage of any of those tax extenders, such as using remaining value mid-month, remaining value half year. But I can also go back and look at the previous year's tax rule changes tied to the TCJA. So if I want to look up all of the rules surrounding bonus depreciation, for example, it's going to show me the new law info, the all law info, and the tables that apply to bonus depreciation selections. And speaking of bonus, I can actually change my bonus percentage on the fly. So let's say I'm only taking 50% of most of my assets. I can apply this to any group, an individual, or all my assets. I can change my bonus percentage. I can take it off or on as well. Now, it is going to know based on a place and service date, for example, whether an asset qualifies for 100% bonus. In my particular case, I've already applied that here in my company. This asset was placed in service in 2019, so it does qualify for a 100% bonus. If you do need to make that mid-quarter convention switch, you can actually do that here, where I can change from half year to mid-quarter as a global change for the applicable fiscal year and for which books I actually want to make that change for. But I do have more granular control if I go into my company settings. Short years are actually supported here, but I can go into the book override and I can change an individual book to use in mid-quarter. I can also specify how I want adjustments handled, for example. So it gives you really great flexibility in how you manage your depreciation. Now, some of the other tools I wanted to point out, for example, is that Audit Advisor. So I'm actually going to run this here for last year. And I'll show you how it actually will capture anything you may be doing that's a potential red flag for getting audited. Now, make this bigger so it's a bit more readable. As you can see, I have a few items here that are being red flagged. And these are all self-inflicted on my part, just so I have some examples to show. So as you can see here, Section 179 limit. I apparently have an issue here where I'm going over the allowed 179 amount. So it's going to identify the issue. It's going to recommend a resolution. And it's also going to create a group where any asset that's triggering that condition will actually show up in that group. And it is going to check all of your assets in the company for whichever book I actually ran this for. And as you can see here, I can run it for tax, I can run it for GAAP, state, any of the books that I choose. And to view those groups, I can simply go here, for example, to the group created for my violations tied to Section 179, and these are all of the assets that's generating that. Because I actually have several assets here that I'm taking $800,000 179 deduction, and so combined, I'm exceeding the $2.5 million maximum allowed for the fiscal year across all of my assets, even though individually they are below the $1 million limit, but in total, I'm in violation. So I can simply make my adjustments and fix things like that and be good to go. So it works very, very well. Let's talk about how assets appear when they come from the planning module. So I will go into the planning module next and show you how that actually interacts here. If I have something in CIP that I've sent over to start depreciation, it's going to create an entry here, the date and timestamp. Anything I sent over at that time are going to show up, be it one asset or 100 assets. And it came over exactly as you're seeing here, where it's including everything needed to start depreciation. So it's going to get the acquisition value, placed in service date, and acquisition date from the planning modules. I can map fields from there as well to fields here in the depreciation general info field, such as project number, any other information I want. But the other pieces of this are actually coming from templates that I have created, which is providing the depreciation method, estimated life for all of my books, and the correct property type, as well as asset classes, for example. So in combination with templates, it makes that process easier. How these templates work, if I were to go and add an asset, instead of having to populate everything manually here, I can simply select a template that I created, and you can create as many templates as you choose. It's going to populate some general info about that type of asset, such as GL account info, the correct asset class that I included in my template, depreciation method, and estimated life for all of my assets. So if I wanted to place this in service at this point, I can simply choose my acquisition date, place in service date. I can use my current date here, for example. Today's date, give it a value. And I can actually apply that across all of my assets. Leave that at 5 years. And I can save that. If I need to attach an image or an invoice, I can easily do that as well. So I'm going to go ahead and simply use an image that I have here. I'm going to go ahead and link that. So now attach an image, or I could browse out to the location of it and save it. If I got 20 of these in, I don't have to sit here and do this 20 times. I can simply go here and tell it, hey, you know what? I got 20 of these on a single invoice, replicate it 19 times, there's my 20 assets. Place in service, ready to start depreciation the next time I run depreciation. So it makes that process quite easy. Now, the process for handling disposals, transfers, partial disposals, and so on are all quite easy to accomplish in the system as well. I can go in and do disposals, full or partial, I'm just going to use a full disposal as an example here. And since this is has quite a bit of net book value, I'm going to go ahead and use sale as my method. If I were to do a partial disposal, I would actually say yes here, enter the value of the portion I want to dispose. But in this scenario, I'm just going to go ahead and do a full disposal. So I'm going to go ahead and enter my cash proceeds, and I'll throw in some expense of sale. And it's going to calculate my gain loss across all the books. Since I have different net book values because I'm doing bonus depreciation per tax and straight line for my internal book, you'll see my gain loss calculations are different. I can choose to not recognize this, or I can choose to defer recognizing it to a later date. And in this particular case, I've taken some investment tax credit on this, so that's actually being calculated, the recapture is being calculated here. Now, I can click on the worksheet if I want to preview the worksheet before actually committing to this. And you'll see here that in the case that you are doing bonus depreciation or Section 179, those will get factored in. You'd see the 179 recapture factored in. My investment tax credit recapture is being calculated here as well. So you get full transparency to everything as part of your disposal. Everything looks good. I can go ahead and say OK, and I've now done a full disposal. It's taking me to the Transactions tab, where I can see some basic info about that disposal, my cash, non-cash, or expense of sale. My status has changed to disposed. Everything is grayed out. I can actually pull up the transaction, pull up that worksheet, export it if I need to. And if you go to the History tab, it's actually going to capture the fact that I've disposed of this asset, and it will show the date done in the system separate from your actual disposal date, as well as who did it. And it does capture all of the other information tied to that disposal, such as cash, non-cash, or expense of sale, and my actual disposal date. And capturing this info is important for full transparency, but let's say someone gave you the wrong asset ID, you dispose of the wrong asset, you can simply go here, delete last transaction, and it's like it never happened. Everything goes back to the way it was and back in service as if nothing happened. But however, that audit trail is still here. You can still see that the disposal was done. It simply creates a new entry that the transaction was reversed when it was done and who did it. Those are some of the types of things you can actually limit who can do, and that's all done in system administration, where I can come in and create a more restrictive profiles, for example, and I can go in here and limit anyone from I assign to this profile from being able to do disposals, doing transfers, or anything like that. So you have some very granular controls that you can do. So on the reporting side of things, many built-in reports, of course, and I'll go ahead and run a couple of these so you can get a quick example, such as that 4562 that I talked about. And this will actually generate the worksheet that goes along with this. So you'll actually have both of the pieces you need. And since this is an actual fileable form, you can simply export this out to a PDF, and as well as the worksheet that goes along with this. And of course, you'll have the tax expense report that's used to reconcile that. We also have now included Form 199A report. Let's run this for last year. And we actually added this form, just wanted to show you the format of what's captured here. So you can see if I had anything that was impacted by that, what data is captured, that we actually do have this 199A report as well. Of course, we have other standard reports, such as a disposal report, which you may need for capturing that realized gain loss info, any net proceeds in total, and you can look at any span in time that you need to, just to get all of the details tied to all of your full or partial disposals that you may have done during a month or a quarter or a fiscal, or you can do years if you choose to. but you'll certainly need your total net proceeds, realized gain loss info, and so on. There's also built-in roll forward reports. Now, in the case of the journal entry, you don't have to actually run this here. As soon as I've run depreciation for whatever period, that information is now made available to Sage 100. So inside of Sage 100, it actually pulls that report from here, and you'll have that information for your journal entry in Sage 100. With Sage 500, it's actually handled just a little bit differently, where it's going to have you close the company, and you'll simply populate your period ending, your journal entry date, select all of the assets. If you have multiple companies, you can select which company you want to run it for, preview and post it, and then it is made available for Sage 500. But Sage 100 actually pulls it from the depreciation module. So let me take a moment and jump into the planning module and give a quick overview of that side of things for handling construction in progress, work in progress, or whatever type of projects you may have. Of course, in this, you can have multiple projects going at once. It is going to give you that snapshot, as I mentioned. That's going to show my actual spend against an original or revised budget, show me what's spent or unspent of the budget. When you initially set up your project, this is where you can actually specify our original budget. And as you're going through that project, if you see that things may go over, this is where you can come in and create a revised budget, update that information, and even get a quick calculation of where things are against those numbers. So if you take a look at each of these individual line items, these are actually what's going to become a fixed asset. Now, the one that I showed you that I've already sent over to start depreciation, I'm just going into that details. You'll have a series of fields here that you can customize, capturing the details you need. Certainly, you'll have invoices from accounts payable, or purchase orders, or whatever the case may be, for permits, materials, and so on. And your total spend for all of these invoices are what's going to become your acquisition value for that asset, and will be measured against an original or revised budget that you may have created for that particular item. On the Asset Information tab is where you will tell it to apply a template, and I'll go into one that I've not yet sent here just so you can see how that works. I can see all the templates I created in the depreciation module. I can set my place and service date, and I can split this single asset into multiple or equal of equal or different values. So once I'm ready to actually place anything in service, I can simply go here and tell it that I want to actually create those assets. And I can selectively pick a couple of items, let's say, send it to one company, and I can select some others that I send to a different company. Or I can select all and send them all to the same company. For reporting out of this, there are consolidated reports, or there's some detailed reports depending on what your needs are for reporting, and you can report against the original or the revised budget, and you can do this in subtotals only, for example, for this consolidated report, where I'm going to look at the current project as I'm in, as well as 2 other projects that I have ongoing. If I run this in subtotals only, it's simply going to show me where my spend is against budget overall, where I can see here, for example, my original budget, my actual spend, and I'm under budget, where that stand against that original budget. But I certainly have the ability to drill down and look at individual details, where you can see I have an asset here that's 69,000 over, another one that's 7848 over, and so on, and see my totals. You can run this all expended out for all your projects and look at this information in more detail, and you can even filter this in several different ways. Okay, I can select to just look at items, for example, that are over budget, or I can look at just items I've sent to be placed in service, or any number of filters that I choose here. Now, you also have the ability to do some ad hoc reporting here, where you can create a custom report, for example, have it refresh the data when you open it, even looking at multiple projects, and this is where that custom reporting comes into play. And this is available both here in the planning module, as well as in the depreciation module, where I can literally build anything I want because it has access to every field in the database. So it gives you some great reporting flexibility. All right. So in order to save some time for Q&A, I'm just doing a shortened version, shortened look at this, because I actually do want to spend a couple of moments on showing you a couple of things with the tracking module. And I'm actually going to use a couple of screenshots here where I can show you what the Android app looks like that you can actually push out an inventory list out to. You can even take pictures of the assets where you can scan those barcodes, update any of the fields, anything that's changed, be able to send that data back to the system, and as I stated, take a picture of the asset and be able to go through a reconciliation process where you accept or reject the changes, and you can even add assets from the side. Now, if I go into one of my asset details here, for example, one of those computers, you'll see here, no access to book fields, so whoever's actually using the tracking module, they cannot accidentally do anything to impact depreciation, but they can certainly update any of the general information fields. They will have all of those same 28 fields you have in the depreciation modules, and they get 12 additional fields that are simply tracking only. And so, for example, if your IT staff wants to capture things like MAC address, software versions that a company doesn't care about, they can leverage using those fields for that. But certainly things that are common, such as location or who it's an asset's assigned to, you'll certainly want to capture those in the shared fields. Any images I have attached on the depreciation side are all here as well. And if I go into my inventory section, this is where I can actually define an inventory list, and I can choose any subset of the assets, push it out to multiple devices, retrieve that data, and go through a reconciliation process where I can then end up with this report. And I'm simply going to run this for the last inventory I completed. And in this report is going to identify what's actually missing, because the big goal of doing a complete inventory is ensuring that you have everything you should have, that they are in service where they should be, that nothing new has been placed out in your environment without your knowledge. And everything you see here with the status of N are the assets that were not found in that particular inventory I did. It's going to identify the tag number, what it is, and anything found with no changes, a status of O, anything I made a change to a status of C. All of the reports are exportable out to various formats, such as Crystal Reports, PDF, Standard Excel, Excel data only, CSV file. So you have many options here. So a report like this that's identifying ghost assets, which are assets not found that you're supposed to have, you can simply export that out to an Excel file, circulate that to other divisions or departments, and see if those assets were actually located elsewhere. If they're not, this is where accounting can now take some action and do a proper disposal, get them off the books, and get that gain-loss calculation and file an insurance claim if needed. All right, so I'm going to actually go back into the depreciation module because I do want to take one quick moment and show you some of the ad hoc reporting or some of the customizations that you can do in depreciation, whether it be for a standard report or if you want to build something from scratch. So let's take a report such as the depreciation expense, which is a common report you'll probably run. I can either run this as is in subtotals only or full detail, but I can certainly also come here and sort and subtotal it by any of the fields. So if, for example, you want to sort and subtotal that report by location, asset class, and so on, you can easily do that natively. For custom reporting beyond that, I can go here and I can add or remove different columns of data. So if you take a look at my report list, my standard reports are in white. Everything you see in yellow, I changed something on that report and saved it as a custom report. And this particular one, I actually went in, added current net book value, which is not a standard column of data on that particular report, told it I want a sum at the end, change the orientation, and so a report like that, I can actually go ahead and run that one. And you'll see you have the ability to also play around with column widths and so on, all of that information as well. So you have quite a lot of flexibility in how you can actually do these reports and even choose, what books you want to run that for. My standard version of this report would not include this column of data. And it is giving me a total on the end. Now, for ad hoc reporting going beyond that, I also have the same access to go into full-blown Crystal reports and literally build anything I want. I can either export a standard report out to Crystal and customize it, or I can actually build something from scratch like this, where I'm looking at any information. I can build any type of formulas I want, create any kind of customizations. Now, for those of you maybe not familiar with Crystal, there's advanced report writing class covers that, but I'm quite certain that Rick and his team at Martin & Associates would be happy to help you guys build some of those custom reports if you need to. So I'm going to actually pause at this point because I do want to leave some time for Q&A and see if anyone had submitted any questions in the chat.
Yep. Wow, thanks a lot, Wayne. That was
my pleasure.
Very comprehensive and clear, so appreciate that. Let's see, questions. Looks like there was one here about the number of companies that you can have. Is there a limit? Are there different versions of the software?
Oh, okay. The standard version, there's a standard standalone, there's a standard network version for multi-user, and then there's a network premier version for multi-user. And the difference really is capacity as far as number of assets. So in the standard versions, typically between 10 or 20,000 assets is when we recommend that users change to using the premier version, which is a SQL Server version. And that SQL Server version will handle over 1 million assets in a company. Now, in the standard version, in either versions, there's no limit to the number of companies you have. So it's really just looking at the total number of assets you have in the database or in each company. So there's no limit to the number of companies is the short answer to that.
All right, good.
And you can, by the way, let me add here, you can have standard U.S. companies. If any of you that are on the call are in a nonprofit or a government entity, it does have support for those as well, but the different rules that apply to those.
Okay. All right. Looks like there's one more. I know that you covered all the different, I guess, modules, so to speak, of the fixed asset system, but I don't think you don't have to get all of them. I think that's the question. How does that work?
Oh, that's true. You don't have to get all modules. For example, many people will start off with the depreciation module, which is the heart of the system. And of course, most people's biggest challenge with handling fixed assets is accurate depreciation for tax and for GAAP. So you can certainly get the depreciation module only, and you can add additional modules later. Some people may start off with the tracking module for physical inventories and add the depreciation later. So you can actually get a single module.
All right, thanks. Well, that's all the questions that I see out there. So we're getting near the end of the time, so we want to respect everybody's afternoon. So Wayne, once again, thanks a lot. Great presentation.
My pleasure.
And if folks have any follow-up questions, go ahead and contact your contact person at Martin & Associates. And once again, this has been recorded, so it is out on our website. So I'll let everybody go. And once again, thanks a lot for your time.
Have a great day, everyone.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.